Under the shimmering domes of the Vexeran Grand Council, the air was thick with ceremonial incense and arrogance. The chamber's obsidian walls reflected the glint of reptilian scales, each counselor adorned in metallic armor that hissed softly with every movement. At the center, a holographic projection of the galaxy rotated lazily, stars flickering like prey caught in a predator's eye. The Terrans, one of the counselors hissed, flicking his forked tongue in contempt, continue to pollute the frontier with their scrap-built colonies. They expand like fungus, without order, without hierarchy. Laughter rippled through the hall, a harsh, rattling chorus. Fungus can be scraped away, another added, voice oily with confidence. Their ships are outdated. Their soldiers are amusing. The last skirmish at the fringe proved that. They fight like children with stolen tools. High Strategos Vrax stood at the head of the council platform, his scaled fingers drumming against the arm of his throne. His armor was older than most of the empires represented there, etched with symbols of 1,000 conquered worlds. His slit-pupilled eyes narrowed as he watched the holographic outline of humanity's territory glow faintly in blue, a stain on the edge of his dominion. Amusing, he said slowly, his voice a gravelly rumble that silenced the room, until amusement becomes infection. You underestimate vermin at your peril. The laughter died, replaced by uneasy silence. Vrax gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on a cluster of human colonies, ragged, irregular, chaotic. They have no central command worth noting, no clear doctrine, no genetic purity, and yet, they survive. Every environment. Every front. A younger general bowed. Survival is not victory, High Strategos. They scavenge, they imitate. Their technology is patchwork, their tactics impulsive. Vrax's mouth curved into what might have been a smile, though it looked more like the baring of fangs. Then it should be effortless to extinguish them. Shall we test your theory? The chamber shifted with anticipation. Operation Cleansing Dawn, Vrax declared. Begin with their outer colonies. Leave one or two intact, we'll need witnesses. Let the galaxy see the futility of human defiance. As the council roared its approval, the holographic stars turned red, marking humanity's doom. Far across the void, in a modest orbital station circling the battered mining world of Aegis IV, Captain Arlen Kale stared at a cracked data screen showing the same galactic map. Except his stars weren't red, they were flickering with distress signals. He rubbed his eyes and muttered to himself, so much for retirement. The comm channel buzzed. Captain Kale, commands on line 3. Something about the Vexerans moving fleets near the border. Kale sighed and reached for his mug, found it empty, and leaned back in his chair. Of course they are. Tell command I'll call back once I find coffee strong enough to face an invasion. The young technician on the other end hesitated. Sir, they said it's not a drill. Kale froze. That's what they always say before sending us to die. He stood, brushed off his jacket, and grabbed the faded cap hanging by the console, the one stitched with the emblem of the Terran Regular Forces. By the time he reached the operations bay, the station was alive with movement. Engineers shouted over comms, drones scurried between hangars, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and panic. Sergeant Mira Solis leaned against a crate of plasma charges, grinning like someone who enjoyed chaos a little too much. You look terrible, Captain. That mean we're finally going back to work? Kale scowled. We were supposed to be on maintenance duty. You break enough alien tech on accident, they give you a desk job. That was my plan. Yeah, well, Mira said, patting a rifle taller than she was, the galaxy hates your plans. Lieutenant Jean Oro appeared from behind a bank of terminals, her pale features lit by the glow of 100 data streams. Confirming multiple Vexeran signatures near Aegis IV. Estimate, 2 full fleets. We're the closest garrison. Kale raised an eyebrow. So they're sending an entire armada to crush a mining colony and a dozen undertrained soldiers. Touching. Orders, sir. Jean asked, her tone calm but eyes sharp. Kale exhaled slowly. Orders. You mean those things they give us before we ignore them? Mira snorted. That's the spirit. He turned to the tactical display. The screen showed glowing red blips converging toward the planet, like a swarm of angry hornets. Around them, the meager blue icons of the Terran defense grid flickered uncertainly. All right, Kale said, straightening his jacket. Let's be honest, we can't win this by the book. The book says we're already dead. He tapped the console, zooming in on the planet's surface. So we're going to write a new one. Jean tilted her head. You're not serious. Completely serious, Kale said. The Vexerans love order. So we give them chaos. We'll make them think they're fighting an army when it's just us, some drones, and a lot of bad ideas. Mira laughed. My favorite kind of plan. He looked at the two of them, one pyromaniac, one genius, both utterly unpredictable, and for the first time in months, he felt the faint stirrings of purpose. Let the council mock our regulars, Kale muttered. Let them think we're the joke. Outside, the first alien ships pierced the atmosphere, their engines burning like falling stars. The comms erupted with warnings, but Kale barely heard them. He stared at the red streaks cutting through the sky and whispered, almost to himself, let's show them what a joke can do. In the depths of space, aboard his flagship, High Strategos Vrax watched the same burning descent through his command viewport. He smiled, slow, cruel, certain. The cleansing begins, he said. Neither of them yet knew that before this war ended, the galaxy itself would learn to whisper one word with fear and awe alike, human. The alarms had stopped blaring hours ago, not because the danger had passed, but because the sound had become useless. Aegis IV's thin atmosphere shimmered with burning debris, the remnants of orbital satellites and defense drones now tumbling in fiery streaks across the night sky. Down below, under the shattered domes of the mining outpost, Captain Arlen Kale watched the lights fall like dying stars and muttered, well, that's one way to brighten the place up. He stood in the command bunker, if it could be called that. The walls were reinforced mining steel, patched with old hull plating. Every screen in the room flickered, some displaying half-fried data streams, others looping the same static warning in 3 languages. Jean Oro sat at the central terminal, hands moving in practiced rhythm as she coaxed a handful of surviving drones into alignment. Comms are fried across 3 sectors. We have partial visual from orbit, but nothing direct. I'm rerouting through a salvage relay on the far ridge. Good, Kale said, pacing slowly. I like surprises, just not from the sky. Mira Solis stomped in through the side hatch, helmet under one arm, a heavy coil of cabling slung over her shoulder. She was smiling again. That was never a good sign. We've got explosives. Not much, but enough to make someone's day worse. Define enough, Kale said without looking up. Enough to turn the West Ridge into a suggestion. Kale rubbed the bridge of his nose. That'll have to do. We're not defending the colony, we're making it look defended. Smoke, confusion, bad intel. Make them guess how many of us are actually down here. Mira dropped the cable onto the table with a clang. So the usual plan, improvise until the laws of physics give up. That's the Terran doctrine, Kale said dryly. Keep them guessing until they trip over their own arrogance. A small holodrone whirred to life on the table, projecting a shaky image of a woman in an officer's uniform. Command Liaison Rhea Vance, far too calm for someone watching an invasion unfold. Captain Kale, she said, her voice filtered through static, your orders are to hold position until reinforcements arrive. Estimated arrival, 40 hours. Kale barked a laugh. 40 hours. The Vexerans will be planting flags in my liver by then. Vance's image flickered. You will hold, Captain. That is an order. The transmission cut out before Kale could reply. Mira looked at him expectantly. So, orders. Kale stared at the dead hollow for a moment, then sighed. Same as always. We do exactly what command told us, only smarter. He walked over to the tactical display, which still showed the colony's scattered layout, half mines, half living quarters, all fragile. They'll land here, on the plains. Big, open field, perfect for their formations. They'll expect us to meet them head-on. We won't. Jean raised a brow. You're planning an ambush. I'm planning confusion. They see a trap, they'll overreact. They always do. He zoomed in on a cluster of tunnels snaking beneath the surface. The miners left a network down there. We'll use it. Pop up, disappear, hit from angles that don't exist. Myra's grin widened. You want chaos? I can give you chaos. We rig half those tunnels to collapse when triggered. Noise, dust, heat signatures everywhere. Their scanners will think we're an army. Perfect, Kale said. Jean, once we start, I want you in their systems. Get me into their comms, their targeting arrays, even their food dispensers if you can. Jean gave a faint, humorless smile. I already am. Their encryption is efficient, but predictable. They reuse key patterns like it's a religion. Good, Kale said, rubbing his hands together. Then bless them with a little heresy. Outside, the ground trembled. The first Vexeran dropships had entered the atmosphere, their engines howling like distant thunder. Dust shook loose from the ceiling, and for a heartbeat the bunker lights flickered. Kale looked up at the noise, then at his team. All right, people. Remember, our job isn't to win. It's to convince them they've already lost. Mira slung her rifle across her back. You know, sir, for someone who used to handle supply chains, you give some pretty inspiring suicidal speeches. Occupational hazard, Kale said. When you plan for shortages long enough, you start assuming survival is optional. She laughed and headed for the door. Jean followed, quiet and focused, her eyes distant as if she could already see the incoming code streams of the enemy fleet. Kale lingered a moment, staring at the tactical map, the blinking blue dots that represented his scattered squads. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn token, a Terran insignia polished smooth by years of nervous habit. All right, you bastards, he murmured, closing his fist around it. Let's make the galaxy doubt itself. He stepped outside. The sky was a riot of burning metal and streaking light, the air thick with the scent of ozone. Dropships roared overhead, sleek black silhouettes descending like knives. Around the colony, Terran troops scrambled into position, dozens of soldiers, most in mismatched armor patched together from half a dozen campaigns. They looked tired. But their eyes were bright. Kale climbed onto a supply crate, raising his voice above the roar. You've all heard the stories. You know what the galaxy thinks of us. Untrained. Underfunded. Disposable. Well, let's make them regret being right about the first two and dead wrong about the last. A few chuckles broke the tension. Someone shouted, "What's the plan, Captain?" Kale grinned. We don't have one. That's our advantage. Laughter rolled through the ranks, grim, wild, defiant. The kind that only comes from people who've accepted that they shouldn't be alive and plan to stay that way out of spite. As the first Vexeran ships touched down beyond the horizon, Myra's traps armed themselves with soft, electronic chirps. Jin's code began to slither through alien comms, rewriting orders before they reached their targets. Kale looked once more at the sky, at the descending fleets, and whispered, "Welcome to the regulars, you magnificent lunatics." Then the planes erupted with fire. The Vexeran landing craft tore through the orange clouds like steel thunderheads, their descent marked by the glow of plasma thrusters and the shriek of atmosphere-burning metal. From the western ridge of Aegis IV, Kale watched their formation unfold with mathematical precision, hundreds of ships in synchronized descent, perfectly aligned. It was the kind of symmetry that made alien generals proud and human commanders nervous. Look at them, Mira muttered beside him, adjusting the targeting scope of her rifle. Even their invasion looks like a parade. Kale smirked. Good. Parades don't know how to duck. Jin's voice crackled in his earpiece, calm but tight. They're establishing calm relays. Their command frequencies are clean and rigid. I'm feeding false telemetry into their network, sensor ghosts, false troop signatures. By the time they land, they'll think we've got 10 battalions underground. Kale ducked as a tremor rolled through the ridge. A drop pod slammed into the plane below, kicking up a storm of dust and shattered rock. The hatch burst open, releasing a wave of armored Vexaran infantry. Scaled, towering, their armor gleamed like oil under the fading sun. They moved in absolute unison, no shouting, no hesitation, no improvisation. Mira spat into the dirt. Creepy bastards. Don't even look tired. Discipline's a hell of a drug, Kale said. He glanced at the detonator strapped to his wrist. Time to give them a side effect. He pressed the switch. A heartbeat later, the ground across the plains rippled like water. Explosions tore through the dust, collapsing the surface into the abandoned mining tunnels below. The first line of Vexarans vanished into the earth with no warning, silent, swift, gone. The rest froze, uncertain for the first time in their genetically regimented lives. Now, Kale said. From the broken ridges, human fire erupted. Railguns hummed, drones dived, and improvised artillery, made from converted mining cannons, launched sonic charges into the confusion. The shock waves distorted the Vexaran sensors, turning their precise battle lines into chaos. Myra's laughter crackled through the comms. They're shooting at their own shadows. Kale grinned. Let's keep it that way. In the command carrier orbiting above, Strategos Vrax leaned over the holographic map, watching as red icons flickered and vanished. Explain, he hissed. His aide stammered, Sir, our ground forces are encountering interference. Multiple false signals. Environmental instability. Instability? Vrax roared. This planet's been mined for a century. You're telling me humans have weaponized holes in the ground? No one answered. Vrax's eyes narrowed. Then fill them. Burn everything below the crust. On the surface, the Vexaran gunships pivoted in eerie synchronization, targeting the ridges with plasma bombardments. Entire hillsides melted into glass. Kale dove behind a slab of rock as molten debris scorched the air above him. Status, he shouted. Jin's voice came sharp and fast. Half our drones are gone, but the network's holding. I've accessed their targeting data. I can make them see phantom units on the North Ridge if you give me 30 seconds. Make it 10, Kale said, peering through the haze. The Vexarans were advancing again, their discipline restored, their lines reforming. Captain, Mira called from her position downhill, they're adapting. Then so do we, Kale said, his mind already moving. He tapped into the comm network. Squad Echo, pull back to Tunnel 7. Detonate when clear. Delta, lay smoke across the valley. Alpha. He paused as the comm sputtered. A static burst drowned his words. Jean. I'm here, she replied. They're counterjamming. Their AI's learning faster than expected. Kale's jaw tightened. Then teach it bad habits. Already on it, she said, and her voice vanished into the hum of encrypted code. Minutes bled into chaos. The battlefield became a blur of light and dust, the air alive with plasma streaks and collapsing rock. Human soldiers darted between cover, firing, vanishing, reappearing in impossible places. Their armor was dented, their weapons improvised, but their unpredictability made them ghosts among machines. A Vexaran commander emerged through the smoke, towering over the humans, plasma blade crackling. He pointed it at Kale's position and hissed something in his native tongue, an order, a curse, maybe both. Kale didn't hesitate. Mira, floor him. A moment later, the ridge beneath the commander's feet erupted in fire. The alien vanished in a plume of dust and flame, and Myra's voice rang over the channel, half laughing, half feral. You said you wanted chaos. Kale coughed, waving away the smoke. Next time, maybe less literal. Where's the fun in that? Jin's calm voice returned, urgent now. Captain, I've breached their comm net. Sending translation, they believe they're fighting at least 4 Terran battalions, multiple artillery units, and orbital reinforcements. Kale blinked. All that from a dozen half-broken soldiers and a handful of drones. Perception is power, Jin said softly. Kale stared across the burning valley. The Vexorans had paused again, uncertain, disoriented, their once perfect formations now broken into scattered clusters. For the first time, he saw it, fear. Not panic, not chaos, but the quiet, dawning realization that they did not understand the enemy they were fighting. He keyed his comm, Mira, how's our ammo? Running low. But morale's excellent. That's 1 out of 2, Kale said. He turned toward the horizon, where the largest of the Vexoran carriers was descending, its shadow stretching across the plains like a storm. Time to end the show before the encore kills us. Plan? Jin asked. Kale smiled, tired and sharp. Improvisation. He sprinted toward the abandoned relay tower, dodging stray plasma bursts, debris crunching under his boots. He reached the base, tore open a maintenance panel, and began rerouting power. Myra's voice came through again. Captain, you're lighting up every sensor in the sector. What are you doing? Making sure they look at me, Kale said. He flipped the final switch. The tower flared to life, a beacon of electromagnetic noise. Above, Vexoran targeting systems locked onto it instantly. Plasma lances rained down, turning the ridge into molten glass. Kale dove into a maintenance shaft as the world erupted behind him. The shockwave rolled through the ground like thunder. When he climbed out again, coughing and burned, the valley was a haze of smoke and twisted wreckage, and the largest Vexoran carrier lay crippled on the ground, half its hull torn open by the reflected blast. Jin's voice broke through the static, trembling for the first time. Captain, they're retreating. Kale looked up at the burning sky and allowed himself one grim smile. No, Lieutenant. They're reconsidering. Night fell on Aegis 4 like an afterthought. The fires from the wrecked Vexoran carrier burned brighter than the planet's dying sun, throwing jagged shadows across the ridges. Smoke rose in pillars, twisting against the wind, carrying the metallic scent of scorched earth and plasma. Kale sat on a broken piece of hull plating, helmet off, staring at the glow below. His face was streaked with grime, his eyes unfocused. For a man who just crippled a fleet ship with mining equipment, he looked like someone who hadn't won anything at all. Mira dropped beside him, holding 2 metal canisters that hissed faintly with recycled air. Here. The good stuff. Filtered twice. You could even call it oxygen. Kale took one, inhaled deeply, and exhaled with a grim smile. Tastes like bureaucracy. That's how you know it's real, she said. Around them, soldiers moved quietly, tending to the wounded, repairing what equipment they could. Every face showed the same mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. They were still alive, and that confused them more than anything. Jean approached from the command post, her visor glowing faint blue in the dark. We've intercepted Vexoran transmissions, she said, kneeling beside Kale. They've declared this a tactical retreat. They're regrouping for a coordinated strike at dawn. Of course they are, Kale muttered. Can't have them admitting they got beaten by miners and bad luck. It's more than pride, Jean continued. They're trying to understand us. Their command AI has compiled over 800 theories about our tactics, and none of them agree. It's confused. Mira laughed softly. Good. I hope it loses sleep over it. I don't sleep, Jean said. Then I hope it glitches in its dreams. Kale leaned back against the wreckage. Let them regroup. Every hour they spend trying to predict us is another we get to make new mistakes. He turned his gaze toward the valley. How's our ammo? Myra's expression darkened. Thin. We've got maybe 50 working rifles, a handful of drones that can still fly, and a few of my special presents. Explosives. Improvised art. Kale smirked. Just make sure the art installation includes an exit. A distant boom rolled across the plains. Everyone froze. Then another, heavier this time. The ground trembled. They're bombarding from orbit, Jean said. Not targeting us directly, scanning fire. They're trying to flush us out. Kale stood, stretching sore muscles. Then let's give them something to find. Within minutes, the camp erupted into movement. Mira and her squad hauled salvaged Vexeran parts toward the mining shafts. Jean worked beside Kale, splicing wires into the base's power grid. What's the plan? Jean asked without looking up. Same as always, Kale said. Confuse the hell out of everyone involved. Myra's voice came through the comms. Captain, I've got an idea for confusion. You remember those plasma cells from their carrier's wreckage? The ones you said would probably not explode on touch. Yeah, those. I've rigged them into a chain link along the North Ridge. When their scanners ping the area, it'll light up like a fireworks show. They'll think we're massing forces. Kale nodded. Do it. And Mira? Yeah. Try not to vaporize the ridge we're standing on. No promises. Jin's fingers moved faster, code spilling across her display. I can amplify the illusion. Feed them false thermal readings, troop chatter, maybe even fake distress signals. If I loop it right, they'll see ghosts of themselves firing from our position. Kale smiled. Now that's poetry. He turned to the others. All right, people, here's the deal. The Vexerans think we're unpredictable. Let's not disappoint them. Hours passed. The night deepened. Above, the stars shimmered faintly through the smoke. Then, as the Vexeran scanners swept across the plains again, Myra's traps detonated. The ridge exploded in a curtain of light and thunder. In orbit, Vexeran command displays went red with alerts. Thousands of new contacts appeared across the surface, phantom armies, advancing from every direction. Multiple Terran divisions confirmed, an officer reported. Estimates suggest heavy armor movement. Impossible, Vrax snarled, staring at the swarm of signals. They have no such resources. Then our sensors are compromised. Vrax slammed his claws into the console. No. The humans are compromised. They simply refuse to admit it. He ordered a full deployment. On the ground, Kale watched streaks of plasma fire rain across the valley, most missing by miles. They're wasting ammo, he said softly. We've become ghosts in their heads. Mira sat beside him, grinning through soot and sweat. You think they'll ever figure us out? Not before breakfast. Jin's voice interrupted. Captain, one of their communication nodes is rerouting. They're trying to isolate our signal source. Kale frowned. Can they? Not yet. But the AI is learning faster. It's starting to recognize patterns in our interference. Then we change patterns, Kale said. Shuffle everything. Pull back from the ridge, collapse the tunnels behind us. We'll vanish before they realize the battlefield's empty. The retreat began quietly, like a shadow slipping through cracks. The Terran soldiers moved through the tunnels, leaving behind only traps, heat signatures, and the illusion of strength. When dawn broke, the Vexeran army advanced on the ridges, weapons ready. They found only silence. Then the ground gave way. Explosions tore through the valley, Myra's final act of artistry. The chain reaction swallowed half the enemy front line, and the shockwave sent dust into the upper atmosphere. Kale's team emerged miles away, from an old transport shaft. The soldiers coughed and laughed at once, leaning on each other, wild-eyed and filthy. Jean stared at her datapad, voice soft but awed. They've halted their advance. They're arguing. Their command AI and their generals. Each blaming the other. Kale leaned against the tunnel wall, exhausted. That's good. Means we've done our job. Mira dropped down beside him, grinning despite the soot streaking her face. Job? I thought we were improvising. Kale chuckled. Improvisation is just strategy that hasn't been explained yet. Above them, the dawn spread across Aegis 4, ashen and fractured, lighting the smoke and ruins in pale gold. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Vexaran fleets were regrouping, trying to make sense of madness. Kale watched the sunrise through the haze and said quietly, "Let them come again. We'll just keep being unpredictable until the galaxy gets tired of losing." The transmission spread faster than any fleet could travel. Across the Imperium expanse, every holochannel, every comm frequency, every outpost received the same flickering feed, the Battle of Aegis 4. At first, alien observers assumed it was another human defeat. Then they saw the truth, a Vexaran carrier burning in the sky, its proud insignia torn apart by a single Terran regiment. The footage looped endlessly, accompanied by human laughter, chaotic, defiant, raw. By the time the Vexaran Dominion cut the signal, it was too late. The galaxy had already seen it. In the depths of the Vexaran flagship Tyrant's hand, Strategos Vrax watched the footage replay in silence. His claws flexed against the armrest, gouging furrows into the metal. The faces of his officers reflected in the holographic fire, their scales dim with unease. They broadcast their own battle, Vrax said finally, voice low. They turned humiliation into spectacle. An aide bowed his head. The humans celebrate unpredictability. Their soldiers behave like mercenaries, not warriors. Mercenaries die for pay, Vrax hissed. These creatures die for mockery. He turned from the projection. Deploy the rest of the armadas. Every colony, every moon. I want their skies black with our ships. If they want chaos, we will drown them in order. The aides bowed and scattered. Vrax remained still, staring at the frozen image of Captain Kale on the hologram, standing amid wreckage, helmet under his arm, grinning through soot. Find him, Vrax murmured. I want to understand the infection before I destroy it. Thousands of light-years away, Kale had no idea he'd become a viral sensation. He was too busy trying to keep the generators from melting. Inside the battered command center of Aegis 4, the hum of overworked power cores mixed with the crackle of damaged comms. Mira was sitting upside down on a crate, soldering wires with a plasma torch. You realize half the galaxy probably thinks we're dead, right? Good, Kale said, wiping grease from his hands. Maybe they'll stop calling. Jean glanced up from her terminal. Unfortunately, they're calling louder. The Tlani have issued a statement demanding clarification on human combat irregularities. The Vexarans have declared total war. And Command wants a press release. Kale blinked. A press release? They want a victory statement. Mira snorted. We're still under siege and they want slogans. Kale leaned against the console. Let's give them one. Still breathing. Still confusing the hell out of everyone. Jean didn't smile. Captain, I've decrypted partial Vexaran command chatter. Strategos Vrax is consolidating 5 fleets. Simultaneous strikes across all human colonies. They're calling it Operation Cleansing Flame. Kale's humor faded. So they're taking us seriously now. They're not just taking us seriously, Jean said. They're terrified. And fear makes them efficient. The room fell silent. The distant rumble of the planet's unstable atmosphere filled the pause. Mira broke it with a grim laugh. Guess the fun part's over. Not yet, Kale said. We can't hold Aegis if 5 fleets show up. We need to make sure they never arrive. He began pacing, eyes darting between flickering tactical maps. Jean, can we still access their logistics network? Partially, she said. I can see their supply lines but not alter them directly. Their encryption has evolved. Then evolve faster, Kale said. If we can't fight their fleets, we'll starve them instead. Mira raised an eyebrow. You're planning to steal their supplies? Borrow, Kale corrected. With prejudice. Hours later, the command room became a storm of motion. Jin's hands moved in a blur, tapping into alien data streams, redirecting cargo routes, falsifying fleet manifests. Vexeran freighters began vanishing from their intended paths, their contents mysteriously rerouted toward secure Terran coordinates. Mira coordinated scavenger teams to receive the stolen goods, her voice echoing through static-filled comms as she directed makeshift landing zones. Captain, Jean said finally, exhaustion in her tone, we've successfully rerouted 2 supply chains. They won't know until it's too late. Kale grinned. Remind me to never underestimate you. You already did, she said softly. A sudden explosion rattled the bunker. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms screamed. Mira grabbed her rifle. They found us? Jin's display flickered. Negative. That came from orbit. Kale ran to the viewport just in time to see a distant fireball streaking across the sky. A Terran cruiser, one of their few reinforcements, burning as it fell. His chest tightened. They're tightening the noose. We should pull back, Mira said. There's nothing left here but rubble and bad memories. Kale didn't answer right away. He watched the ship vanish beyond the horizon, its death silent in the thin air. Then he turned, voice steady. We're not retreating. We're spreading. Spreading. We'll leave Aegis, but not as fugitives. As ghosts. Every Terran colony will run the same playbook: chaos, misdirection, asymmetric strikes. We turn every outpost into a nightmare they can't predict. Mira grinned. Finally, a plan worthy of our lack of planning. Kale allowed himself a small smile. Exactly. By the time the next dawn rose over Aegis 4, the Terran regulars were already dismantling their base. Drones lifted crates of salvaged tech into orbit, transports hummed through the ash-filled skies, and the once-burning planes fell silent again. In the upper atmosphere, Kale stood on the open ramp of a shuttle, wind howling around him. The planet below glowed faintly, a scar against the void. Jean joined him, eyes fixed on the fading horizon. You think they'll follow us? She asked. They have to, Kale said. It's the only thing that makes sense to them. And when they do, then we'll teach them again that sense is overrated. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. You're impossible. That's the idea. Behind them, Myra's laughter echoed through the cabin. Hey, Captain. Command just sent congratulations. Apparently, we're heroes now. Kale stared into the endless dark. Heroes, he repeated quietly, almost to himself. They'll change that word once they realize what we're about to do. The shuttle's engines roared, lifting them into the stars, leaving Aegis 4 to burn behind them. The signal of their victory, and defiance, continued to ripple across the galaxy. And somewhere, in the data streams of frightened empires, a new phrase began circulating among alien soldiers and strategists alike. The regulars are coming. The council chamber aboard the Tyrant's hand shimmered with blue light as Strategos Vraxa's holographic lieutenants assembled. 20 warlords, each commanding a fleet that could level continents, waited in silence. Their reptilian eyes flicked uneasily toward the Strategos as he loomed above the central dais. The air pulsed with the low hum of reactors and the faint static of suppressed rage. Vrax let the silence stretch until it became suffocating. "You have all seen the transmissions," he said at last. "The Terrans spread their chaos like disease. Entire sectors mock us. Trade routes crumble. Even the Valith Council has questioned our control." He turned slowly, gaze sweeping across them. "That ends now." A general with scarred mandibles dared to speak. "Strategos, their attacks are scattered. They strike where our defenses are weakest, then vanish. It is impossible to anticipate their—" "Impossible is a word for prey," Vrax interrupted, his voice cold. "The humans think unpredictability is a weapon. I will show them that discipline is extinction." He gestured to the star map hovering above the dais. 5 red clusters bloomed across the galactic plane, each representing a full armada. Operation Cleansing Flame. We burn their colonies simultaneously. No mercy. No negotiation. They will learn that chaos cannot exist in ashes. One by one, the generals nodded. The order was given. Far from the Vexaran flagship, aboard a converted mining freighter hidden in an asteroid field, Captain Kale studied intercepted transmissions. The hum of jury-rigged engines filled the narrow corridors. Mira sat cross-legged atop a crate of scavenged weapon cores, tinkering with a bomb that hissed suspiciously. "So, 5 fleets," she said. "That's excessive." "They're scared," Kale replied, not looking up. "Fear makes people waste resources. It's the one advantage we have." Jin's holographic interface glowed in the dim light. "Intercepted logistics show they're launching within 72 hours. If they strike as planned, half our colonies are gone before we can even send warnings." Kale leaned back, running a hand through his unshaven hair. "Then we don't warn them. We confuse them." Mira raised an eyebrow. "You mean more than usual?" Kale smirked faintly. Jean adjusted her visor. "Once I'm in, I'll have 5 minutes before they detect the intrusion." "Plenty of time," Mira said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "I only need 3 to make them regret being born." Kale smiled, though his eyes stayed fixed on the fortress ahead. "Let's try to make it 4. I'd like to retire someday." They drifted toward the relay using thruster packs, silent as ghosts. The Vexaran sentries were methodical, scanning the asteroid belt in precise intervals. But Jean had timed the rotation perfectly. They landed on the outer hull just as the scanners swept past. Mira planted a mag cutter and carved open a section of the paneling. Inside, conduits pulsed with light, the neural veins of the station. Jean crawled inside, connecting her wrist link. The world around her dissolved into streams of alien code. She began weaving false signals, rerouting fleets, manufacturing ghost colonies, and duplicating distress beacons. Kale watched the timer on his wrist. 2 minutes, he said. "Almost done," Jean replied, her voice calm. "I'm giving them an entire phantom war to fight." The first alarm blared. Red light bathed the tunnel. "They've noticed," Mira said, grinning. "Showtime." Vexaran guards emerged from the airlock, plasma rifles crackling. Mira met them with a grin and a grenade. The explosion tore through the corridor, scattering shards of armor and molten metal. Kale grabbed Jin's arm as she finished the last command. "Got it," she gasped. "Every fleet is heading to the wrong coordinates." "Good enough," Kale said, pulling her out. "Time to leave before we become part of the decor." They blasted off the hull just as the relay's defense turrets came alive, spitting plasma into the void. The freighter's engines flared, catching them mid-drift, and the asteroid belt erupted behind them in chaos. Hours later, aboard the ship, Jean leaned against the console, sweat streaking her brow. "It worked," she said. "The Vexaran fleets are scattering across empty sectors. They'll spend weeks chasing ghosts." Mira laughed. "So we basically started a galactic hide-and-seek." Kale didn't laugh. He was staring at the tactical screen, where 5 glowing red fleets twisted into confusion. "They'll figure it out eventually," he said. "And when they do, they'll hit harder." Jean looked at him. "Then what's the plan?" Kale's eyes didn't leave the screen. "We hit first." In the tyrant's hand, Strategos Vrax stood before his lieutenants again. The star map flickered erratically, fleets scattered far from their assigned targets. "What is this?" Vrax demanded. "Who altered the pathing?" "Unknown," Strategos, a technician stammered. "Our systems show conflicting orders. Entire armadas have changed course." Vrax's claws clenched. "It's them." He stared into the shimmering chaos of the star map, the human infection spreading through his perfect lines of war. For the first time, something like unease crept into his voice. "Find them. Every system, every relay, every rock they hide under. Find them and erase them." As the war machine began to churn again, across the galaxy the humans were already on the move, laughing in the shadows, rewriting the rules of battle one hacked relay at a time. And though Vrax didn't yet know it, Operation Cleansing Flame was already burning, just not the way he intended. The command deck of the Resolute Dawn buzzed with a low, tense hum. The holographic map of the galaxy flickered in shades of red and blue, showing the scattered mess that used to be the Vexaran fleets. Kale stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the chaos unfold. Every few seconds, a new distortion rippled across the projection, another fleet rerouted, another supply line hijacked. To anyone else, it looked like madness. To Kale, it looked like progress. Jean leaned over the console, her fingers dancing across the interface. "They're still trying to re-establish comms, but it's a mess. Some fleets are responding to ghost commands, others are chasing phantom distress calls." Mira grinned from her station. "So basically, we've turned the galaxy's most disciplined army into a bunch of confused space tourists." Kale didn't look away from the map. "Tourists with planet-killing weapons. Let's not forget that part." "Never said it was a perfect metaphor," she said. A chime cut through the air. The hologram shifted, revealing Admiral Rowe of the Terran Coalition. His uniform was immaculate, but the exhaustion in his eyes betrayed the toll of command. "Captain Kale," the Admiral said, his voice clipped. "Command has reviewed your actions in the Cadron Belt. You've effectively paralyzed half of the Vexaran war machine. And you've also made us the highest priority targets in the galaxy." "Good to know we're finally on someone's priority list," Kale said dryly. Rowe didn't smile. "You've bought us time. But it won't last. Vrax has regrouped what remains of his fleets near Titan's reach. If they consolidate there, they can relaunch a coordinated strike within days. We need to hit them first." Mira raised an eyebrow. "Hit them?" "Sir, that's 5 armadas worth of firepower." "Then find a way to make it count," Rowe said. "Command will send what little we have left. The rest is up to you." The transmission cut off. Kale stared at the empty space where the Admiral's image had been. "So, no pressure." Jean folded her arms. "We can't match their numbers. Not even close." "Numbers don't win wars," Kale said. "Perception does." Mira smirked. "So, we bluffed the biggest army in the galaxy." "Something like that," Kale said. He stepped forward and magnified the map. "Titan's reach is a fuel hub. If we hit their logistics before they fully regroup, we can cripple their movement. Jean, can we infiltrate their supply databases again?" "Already working on it," she said. "They've upgraded their encryption, but I've seen their new patterns. Give me 6 hours." "You've got 3, Kale replied. "Of course," she muttered. Mira kicked back in her chair. "And what's my job while our genius hacks alien gods?" Kale turned to her. "You're going shopping." Her grin widened. "Explosives? Something that makes the word boom feel inadequate." 6 hours later, the Resolute Dawn drifted in stealth mode above Titan's reach, a massive gas giant surrounded by orbital refineries and cargo stations. The Vexaran fleet hung like metallic predators in orbit, their ships casting shadows across the storms below. Inside the Terran vessel, Jin's console glowed with streams of alien data. Almost there, rerouting the fuel manifests, cross-linking the reactor codes, and done. "Talk to me," Kale said. "They'll be loading their main carriers in about 12 minutes. I've redirected one of their reactor stabilization sequences. When they start the process, it's going to cascade." "How big a cascade?" Mira asked. Jean hesitated. "Let's just say, if we're still in the neighborhood, we'll be atoms too." "Perfect," Mira said. "I love living on the edge of atomic disintegration." Kale straightened. "All right, team. Let's move." The Resolute Dawn slipped through the debris field, masked by the electromagnetic interference from Titan's atmosphere. Mira guided a small strike team onto one of the refineries, planting explosive charges on fuel lines and control relays. Kale watched from the bridge, his eyes fixed on the timer. "Charges set," Myra's voice crackled over comms. "And Jin's little software surprise should be ready to join the party." "Get back to the ship," Kale said. As the strike team raced back, a flare of light erupted from one of the refineries. Then another. The explosion spread like a chain reaction, jumping from station to station, each blast brighter than the last. "Chain reaction starting," Jean shouted. "Their reactors are going critical." Kale's eyes widened as the first Vexaran carrier ignited, its hull splitting open in a blossom of fire. The blast wave tore through nearby vessels, scattering debris into the gas giant's atmosphere. "Punch it," Kale ordered. The Resolute Dawn accelerated hard, slipping between burning wrecks as shockwaves rolled through space. Mira strapped in, laughing breathlessly. "That was insane. Even by our standards." Jin's hands trembled over the controls. 3 fleets disabled. 2 in disarray. Their supply chains gone. Kale leaned forward, staring at the chaos unfolding behind them. And the legend grows. Across the galaxy, the footage once again spread like wildfire. Vexaran command logs showed panic, contradictory orders, fleets abandoning formation. Alien analysts debated how humans could execute such precision with such small forces. None could agree. In the ruins of Titan's Reach, a single Vexaran transmission escaped before the blackout. "They are not soldiers. They are contagion." Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, Kale watched the stars shift as they entered warp. Mira leaned against the bulkhead, grinning. "So, Captain, what do we call this one?" Kale didn't look away from the viewport. "A reminder." Jean frowned. "Of what?" "That even the smallest fire can burn down an empire," he said quietly. The ship vanished into the void, leaving behind the dying embers of Titan's Reach and the echo of laughter carried across the stars, defiant, human, unstoppable. The wreckage of Titan's Reach still burned behind them, but there was no time to celebrate. The Vexaran counterattack came faster than anyone expected. Within hours, long-range scanners lit up with crimson warnings, reinforcements pouring in from every direction. The Resolute Dawn's bridge was bathed in red light as alarms wailed, and Kale stood in the center of it all, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "They're forming up around the debris field," Jean said, her voice taut. "Looks like Strategos Vrax himself has joined the battle." Mira let out a low whistle. "Well, guess we've made an impression." Kale's gaze stayed cold. "He's not." Massive shards of twisted metal floated silently, reflecting the dim light of the gas giant below. The ship's hull groaned as it scraped through the wrecks of fallen battleships. Plasma arcs flashed across the void as the Vexarans fired blind into the field, trying to flush them out. Kale stood at the helm, calm amid the chaos. "Deploy drones." Myra's fingers danced over the launch controls. "Drones away." Hundreds of small craft shot out from the cargo bay, weaving through the debris like fireflies. The Vexeran's targeting systems locked onto them instantly, mistaking them for human escape pods. The fleet opened fire. Now, Kale said quietly. Jean triggered the plasma cores. The debris field erupted in light. The chain reaction tore through the wreckage, turning the void into a storm of shrapnel and fire. Vexeran ships shattered under the blast, their shields failing as the shockwave rippled outward. Multiple hits. Jean shouted. 2 destroyers down. Their flagship's shields are destabilizing. Kale gripped the railing. Take us straight at it. What? Mira barked. We're charging the flagship. Exactly. They'll never expect it. The Resolute Dawn plunged through the explosion's aftermath, weaving between fragments of molten hulls. The Vexeran flagship, a massive behemoth of black metal, loomed ahead, its surface crawling with energy as its shield generators struggled to recover. Jean looked at Kale, eyes wide. If we get any closer, their gravity well will tear us apart. Not if Mira does her job, Kale said. Mira cracked her knuckles. Oh, I've been waiting for this. She rerouted every ounce of power from the auxiliary systems into the main thrusters. The ship screamed as it accelerated. Inside the Vexeran command deck, Strategos Vrax stared at the human vessel on his display. They're coming directly at us, he growled. Strategos, the humans are. Silence, Vrax hissed. Focus all fire on that ship. I want it vaporized. Hundreds of plasma bolts streaked through space, converging on the Resolute Dawn. Jin's voice rose over the alarms. Shields collapsing. Hold steady, Kale said, voice calm but low. Mira, on my mark. The ship shuddered violently as a plasma blast grazed the hull. Fire spread through the corridor. Jin's screen flickered. We can't take another hit. Kale's hand hovered over the command interface. Mark. Mira slammed her palm down. The Resolute Dawn released its last payload, an empty Vexeran battleship they had captured at Titan's Reach, rigged with a reactor bomb. It drifted forward, propelled by momentum, directly into the path of Vrax's flagship. For one heartbeat, the galaxy went silent. Then light consumed everything. The explosion tore through the flagship's shields, rupturing its reactor core. The resulting detonation was so vast that the shockwave shattered nearby cruisers and illuminated the gas giant's upper atmosphere like a false dawn. The Resolute Dawn was flung clear, tumbling through space. Systems flickered, gravity failed, and the crew was thrown against their restraints. Jean coughed through the smoke, blinking through the haze. Tell me that worked, she rasped. Kale coughed out a laugh. Look out the window. Through the shattered viewport, the remains of Vrax's flagship drifted, broken, burning, and silent. The Vexeran formation was in chaos, their command structure obliterated. Mira let out a weak cheer. You're insane, Captain. Gloriously insane. I'll take that as a compliment, Kale said, his voice hoarse. Jean slumped back in her seat, half smiling. So what now? We run before the rest figure out what happened. Kale looked out at the wreckage, the endless scattering of burning ships. No, he said quietly. We let them see. Let them remember what happens when they corner humanity. As emergency lights flickered back to life, the crew watched the field of fire and ruin expand before them. Across alien communication networks, fragmented transmissions screamed in disbelief. Some called it a trap. Others called it an act of madness. But the phrase that spread fastest came from a terrified Vexeran captain whose voice cracked as he shouted across the open channel. They weaponized chaos. Kale smiled faintly as he listened. No, he murmured. We just stopped pretending it wasn't our natural state. Outside, the storm of wreckage faded into the distance, and the Resolute Dawn slipped quietly into the shadows of space, carrying with it the legend of a species the galaxy would never underestimate again. The silence after the battle was almost worse than the noise. The resolute Dawn drifted in the wreckage field, engines cold, hull scorched black from plasma burns. The crew worked in near darkness, patching what systems they could while the smell of ozone and melted metal lingered in the air. Outside, the remains of the Vexaran armada floated like ghosts, massive carcasses of ships torn open, still glowing faintly with radiation. Kale stood by the viewport, one hand braced against the frame, watching pieces of alien warships spin slowly into the abyss. "Status?" he asked without turning. "Life support is stable," Jean said, her voice quiet but steady. "Navigations, mostly fried. We can't jump to warp until I rebuild the matrix. And the reactor's at 40%. 40% is more than zero," Mira said, crouched beside a console with a wrench in her teeth. "We're practically thriving." Kale allowed himself a small smirk. "That's the spirit." "Speaking of spirits," Mira added, "ours are about to have company. Incoming transmission, open channel, wideband." Jin's fingers flicked across the panel. Static filled the room, followed by a voice, low, guttural, and trembling. "This is Commander Tvar of the 2nd Dominion Fleet, to any surviving Vexaran forces, retreat. Repeat, retreat. The humans, they." The message cut off in distortion, but the tone said enough. Mira chuckled darkly. "The mighty Dominion just called for a retreat. That's a first." Kale didn't laugh. "Fear spreads faster than war. Once their command collapses, their soldiers will follow." "And us?" Jean asked. "What do we do when the galaxy finally believes we're monsters?" Kale turned from the viewport. "Then we let them." The lights dimmed as she linked the system. Kale stood in front of the flickering hollow emitter, the ghostly blue light painting sharp shadows across his face. "This is Captain Arlen Kale of the United Terran Coalition," he said, his voice calm, deliberate. "To any who can hear me, this is not a declaration of victory. This is a warning. Humanity never sought conquest. We never asked for this war. But you came to our homes, our worlds, our families, and you thought our strength was measured in ships and weapons." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "You were wrong. Our strength is that we don't break. We adapt. You call us unpredictable, chaotic, reckless. We call it survival. And we're very, very good at it." He cut the transmission. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of dying systems. Jean stared at him. "You just told the entire galaxy we're unkillable." Kale shrugged. "Good. Maybe they'll stop trying." Outside, fragments of alien ships drifted past like slow-moving meteors. The resolute Dawn's engines groaned back to life, faint blue thrusters pushing it free from the debris. Picking up new chatter, Jean said, eyes on the console. "It's weird. Half the Dominion fleets have gone dark. The rest are arguing over command protocols. Some of their colonies are broadcasting surrender requests, to us." Mira blinked. "Surrender? To humans?" Kale watched the faint glow of wreckage fade behind them. "To fear," he said. Days passed as they limped from system to system, evading what remained of the Vexaran patrols. Everywhere they went, they found evidence of collapse, outposts abandoned, warlords turning on one another, communications jammed by their own allies. The Dominion's perfect order had fractured beyond repair. On the 4th day, a distress signal came through. Not Vexaran this time. Terran. Source? Kale asked. Outer Rim Colony, Jean said. Civilians under attack. A rogue Vexaran battalion, probably didn't get the memo about losing. Kale didn't hesitate. Plot a course. Captain, our systems are barely holding, Jean began, but Kale cut her off. We started this by surviving. We finish it by protecting what's left. The resolute dawn emerged from hyperspace above the colony, a desolate mining world half buried under storm clouds. Below, flashes of weapons fire streaked across the surface. The battered remains of the Vexaran battalion crawled across the desert like dying insects, their armor cracked, their morale shattered. Mira took one look at the scene and smiled grimly. "Let's end this properly." Kale gave the order. The ship's cannons roared, tearing through the Vexaran line with surgical precision. On the ground, human defenders raised their rifles toward the sky as the alien advance crumbled. Within minutes, the battlefield fell silent. The few surviving Vexarans dropped their weapons, some falling to their knees, others simply staring in disbelief. One of them looked up at the passing ship and whispered something that the comm sensors caught faintly: "Regulars." When the dust settled, Kale stood on the colony's surface, helmet under his arm, the wind cutting across the wasteland. Mira and Jean joined him, both silent. "Think they'll come back?" Mira asked. Kale gazed at the horizon, where the last traces of smoke curled into the sky. "No," he said. "Not for a while. Maybe never." Jean tilted her head. "And when they do?" Kale's mouth curved into a faint, tired smile. "Then we'll remind them what regular really means." As the sun rose over the scarred world, the Terran flag was hoisted above the colony, tattered, scorched, but standing. Across the galaxy, scattered signals carried one message whispered in every tongue: the humans had survived, not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as the species that refused to die. The galaxy had learned fear. Not of monsters or legends, but of something far worse: ordinary humans who refused to stay ordinary. Months passed after the final battle, and the stars seemed quieter than before. The once blazing war routes through the Orion sectors had gone dark, the transmission lines that once carried threats now carried trade offers, requests for truces, and the occasional cautious greeting. Humanity, scattered and battered, was rebuilding, not under the illusion of peace, but under the weight of its own legend. Captain Arlen Kale sat alone on the observation deck of the Resolute Dawn, now anchored above the Terran capital world, Solara Prime. Below him stretched a patchwork planet reborn from ash, half reconstruction zones, half fields of green. He could almost hear the hum of life resuming, the noise of stubborn survival. The galaxy hadn't destroyed humanity. It had made them unforgettable. The door hissed open. Mira stepped in, carrying 2 cups of something steaming. "Synthetic coffee," she said, handing him one. "Closest thing we've got to the real deal until Earth's farms start exporting again." Kale took it, inhaling the bitter scent. You'd think after everything, they'd have prioritized coffee production first. Mira grinned, sitting beside him. You'd think. But apparently oxygen and clean water outrank caffeine. He sipped, grimacing. Barely. They sat in silence, watching the stars drift by. Out there were the same constellations they'd fought beneath, the same places that had seen fleets burn and worlds crumble. Now those systems were quiet, their scars fading under cautious treaties. "How's Jean?" Kale asked. Mira exhaled softly. "Still doing her thing. She's helping rebuild the network grid. Says she's making sure no one can ever pull a Dominion trick like that again. She always did hate being outsmarted." "Yeah," Mira said, smirking faintly. "Especially by herself." A small tremor of laughter passed between them. It felt strange, almost unfamiliar. The intercom chimed. "Captain Kale, message incoming. Encrypted, Terran High Command." He sighed. "They still calling me Captain? I thought retirement was supposed to mean something." "Maybe they're just afraid to stop," Mira said. Kale tapped his wrist console. The message projected midair, a holographic face of Admiral Corrin, lined with fatigue and something like awe. "Kale. The Dominion has officially withdrawn from all contested territories. Their council has fractured. Some worlds are petitioning to join the coalition, others just want to be left alone. The galaxy's quieter than it's been in centuries. And the reason, whether they admit it or not, is you, and your so-called regulars. Kale said nothing. Corrin continued, High Command wants to name a new branch after your unit. The Regular Corps. Not Special Forces, not Commandos, just a symbol of what humanity is when it refuses to break. Thought you should hear it from me. The transmission ended. The silence that followed was long, heavy, but not unpleasant. Mira leaned back. You realize that means you're going to be a statue somewhere, right? Maybe a holiday. Kale groaned. Great. Just what I wanted, children throwing paint at my bronze face. She laughed quietly. Admit it, though. Feels good knowing the galaxy won't try exterminating us for a while. Kale stared into the stars again. They'll try again someday. Someone always does. Then what? Then someone else takes our place. Someone who doesn't know the meaning of impossible. That's humanity's curse, and its gift. A flicker of light caught his eye. Beyond the viewport, a small Terran ship was leaving orbit, its hull marked with a simple insignia, two crossed lines forming an unbroken circle. The symbol of the Regular Corps. He watched it vanish into hyperspace. They're already out there, he murmured. Mira followed his gaze. Training. Learning, he corrected. Because we didn't win by fighting harder. We won by thinking differently. That's what they'll carry with them. The ship vanished into the dark, leaving a streak of light across the void. Later that night, Kale walked through the halls of Solara Base, passing engineers, recruits, and children who saluted out of reflex. He returned each one with a nod. On the wall beside the mess hall, someone had etched a phrase into the metal, Regulars don't wait for orders, they make them worth giving. He paused, running a hand across the words. It wasn't pride he felt, more like an echo of every loss, every gamble that shouldn't have worked but did. Outside, a broadcast played across every colony frequency, stories of the war, of the small battles that turned tides. Each tale exaggerated, embellished, twisted by distance, but one truth always remained, humanity had fought with nothing and won everything. Jean appeared from a side corridor, carrying a stack of datapads. They're calling it the Age of Ingenuity, she said. Whole academies teaching your chaos doctrine. You're a syllabus now. Kale groaned. Perfect. Next thing you'll tell me there's a motivational poster. Jean smiled slyly. Two, actually. One says, think like Kale, and the other says, never fight fair. Mira joined them, laughing. You should be proud. You made unpredictability respectable. Kale looked between them, his crew, his family, his last link to the war that had defined them. We made survival beautiful, he said quietly. Outside, the twin suns of Solara Prime began to rise, casting long gold streaks across the city below. The light caught the hull of the Resolute Dawn moored above, turning its scars into gleaming ribbons. The ship that had outlived the impossible still stood watch over the world it had saved. As Kale watched the dawn break, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, peace, uneasy but real. Humanity would stumble again, fight again, maybe even lose again. But it would never fade. Not while someone, somewhere, remembered what a handful of regular humans had done with nothing but grit, wit, and the refusal to give up. Mira raised her cup toward the sunrise. To the regulars, she said softly. Kale lifted his own. To the ones who make the impossible ordinary. They drank in silence as the stars dimmed and a new day began, their reflections caught in the light of a universe that, at last, had learned respect, born not from fear of monsters, but from the awe of humans who refused to stop fighting for life.